Move over, Mario Kart World, because Donkey Kong Bananza is the real premier Switch 2 title. Bananza is a celebration of all things Donkey Kong without sinking in the nostalgia. It recognizes its roots while still defining its play experience in a brand new way: destruction. Annihilation, devastation, wrecking, and ruination. Pick your poison, any of those words are apt descriptors for what you'll be doing. Through the dismantling forces of Donkey Kong's fist, you'll smash through terrain and enemies of all sort, while on the prowl for coveted Banandium gems, this game's equivalent of Mario stars. This is the core experience of Donkey Kong Bananza, and it's a strong player-driven exploration model, allowing you to carve your route through each of the many varied stages. Combined with platforming challenges, you have yourself a strong follow-up to Mario Odyssey, even if the plumber bro has been left behind in favor of Primate and Pauline. And many other layers have been stacked on top to enhance the experience, resulting in a gameplay loop that is engaging, and not engaging every few moments or during specific set pieces. No, engaging every single second that you play. It's borderline overwhelming as very little downtime is afforded, resulting in play sessions that last not until you reach a convenient stopping point, but whenever you yourself need a break from the high energy. But boy is that high energy satisfying, alluring you back in after you've had time away to wind down. And that strength in gameplay makes Donkey Kong Bananza a surefire nominee for Game of the Year. Not just here on my channel, but across the medium. Bananza gets going with Donkey Kong and Pauline searching for a way back up to the surface after an evil monkey named Void Kong collapses a chunk of the planet in on itself. To do so, they seek the Banandium root, a magical power that's housed at the planet's core. But to make their way back up, they first have to travel deep down through many layers. That's the central premise of the game's story, but it sets up a constantly evolving world, transforming in aesthetics and terrain as you move downwards towards the core. With this premise established, the devs were free to choose from classic biomes and build levels around them, including lagoons, icy worlds, forests, canyons, beaches, and more, including some unique themes like a racing world, a map inspired by food, and even an extreme DJ booth. Within each of these worlds exist different sublayers, allowing you to continue your descent without forcing the devs to abandon the current aesthetic. The player's sense of progression is maintained while allowing the team to continue fleshing out the ideas that they've established so far in any given world while maintaining a healthy level structure and pacing. To be fair, many of these level concepts have been seen countless times across the history of platformers, but what makes it feel incredibly novel here is the use of voxel technology. Building terrain using this tech allows for destruction physics to be a main part of the gameplay, meaning that Donkey Kong can smash through anything in his way, or at least most things. Nintendo smartly created different types of terrain using this tech, such as sand, ice, stone, grass, gold, dirt, salt, thorns, spikes, lava, water, mud, goo, concrete, and more, each with their own properties, like reacting differently when struck, being strong or weak to other types of terrain, or even causing damage. These terrain types are then used as the main building block to craft the worlds, mixing and matching them in unique ways to create pathways and challenges for the player to navigate. Understanding the types of terrain and their properties takes on more significance the longer you play, which adds more challenge to the experience. Hell, the terrain is also used to coat enemies like a thick armor, forcing your hand to interact with them in different ways, as punching won't always be a solution. Sometimes you might have to use something with explosive elements, or bathe the foe in light, or simply knock them off the edge of the map. The team got super creative in this regard. All of this is to say that terrain is king in Donkey Kong Bananza, and the team clearly had a strong grasp on how to build a huge plethora of types and how to assemble them into stages to create the gameplay loop they wanted. Of course, terrain is only half of that equation. After the levels are built, the player needs a strong moveset to navigate it. Normal Mario platforming wouldn't have been satisfying, nor would it have taken advantage of the voxel technology, which is why the switch to DK was so brilliant. I mean, he is a gorilla after all, strength should certainly be a forte of his, and it certainly is here. Smashing your way through levels could very well be this game's tagline. It is baked into every part of the gameplay loop and level design, much in the same way climbing was in Breath of the Wild. In other words, it's one of those defining principles that you'll be missing when you start playing other games, asking yourself, why can't I just smash my way through this blockade? Well, you're not playing Bananza anymore in that case. You see, Donkey Kong's fists are capable of smashing through all sorts of basic terrains, meaning that when you see something of interest, whether it be a fossil or a banana collectible, a gold currency deposit, a treasure chest, or a health pickup, you are free to go there immediately. You don't need to climb, go around, run, or jump, although you can still do all of those things thankfully. But instead, your main way of going through anything is just that, straight through it like a wrecking ball. If you can dream of a way to reach it, you can. There's 3 buttons on the Switch too directly related to smashing in this game, which is brilliant. They all go in different directions, forward, down, and up. Plow your way through an obstacle, go digging in the dirt for valuables, or ascend a mountain from the inside by smashing upwards. It's up to you, and that freedom to reach the next location with any path of your choosing is what creates a very engaging second-to-second gameplay loop that makes time fly by. Of course, aimlessly parading around a level, destroying everything, only stays fun for so long. There needs to be purpose to the movement, and that's where the collectibles come into play. Banandium gems, which I'll just call bananas for simplicity's sake, are your primary collectible, while fossils of many sizes are scattered everywhere as well. But bananas are the true king in Bananza. You find them everywhere. They're hidden in levels, they're awarded for completing bonus rooms that are akin to shrines in Breath of the Wild, they're found in bunches after beating bosses or pushing to new layers, and they're handed out from NPCs for completing various tasks, like destroying certain terrain types, chatting with Cranky Kong, or completing quizzes, amongst others. In total, there is 777 to gather, with bunches of bananas counting as just one in this setup. I felt I did a good job of exploring each layer before heading to the next, and I still only managed to find 485 before defeating the final boss. That fact really excited me, knowing that just because the credits rolled, I didn't have to stop playing. That's a strong indication of a great game, but more on that later. What makes bananas so satisfying to collect is how frequently you get them combined with the collection method. Having to smash them up was a wise choice. You can't go more than a few moments without grabbing at least one, especially with the radar ability that lets you see through walls. And every time you pick one up, you feel a sense of progression, as if you're significantly closer to getting them all, even though there's hundreds. And the animation you witness is the cherry on top. It's short and it's sweet as to not overstay its welcome, but also satisfying to listen to. It's a credit to the game's animation and sound work that this doesn't become a repetitive process despite how many times you encounter it. So in this way, bananas are your biggest head turners. You spot one in the distance, you see a puzzle room or an NPC who grants you one, and you immediately start heading there, carving your own path through the terrain as I outlined a moment ago. It is simple but effective game design that keeps you motoring all over the maps. Thankfully though, the game switches things up quite often, allowing those journeys to avoid feeling samey by introducing new elements that define each level just as much as the aesthetics do. Bonanzas come to mind first, but more on those later. Instead, I want to highlight level-specific concepts like thorns that halt your progress on Ingot Isle, this large molten crater lurking below the rainy cliffsides in the Tempest layer, restoring the music in the prison layer, the continuous digging of the landfill layer, the rhino racing in this nostalgia-fueled stage, and using salt to soak up goo in the feast layer. These are broad ideas that help define their specific stages and are used once and then forgotten about when you go to the next layer, and it keeps things feeling fresh. When it comes to platformers, Nintendo has always been brilliant in providing an array of challenges and mechanics that define their stages. Introduced early, built on until the challenge crescendos, and then abandoned in favor of a new idea in the next level to avoid staleness. That creativity is felt all throughout Bonanza's level design, and it's why each journey to gather a banana doesn't feel like any other. Going hand in hand with bananas are fossils and gold. Many stages are home to fossils that are lodged in the bedrock, often tucked away or hidden behind obstacles for you to collect. There's small, medium, and large varieties, and gathering them all is just as monumental a task as is the bananas. In many ways, it's like the bananas are the 1A collectible and these are the 1B. They're often more hidden, harder to find, and exist in higher volumes than bananas. They also act as a currency, allowing for customization, granting you the power to change DK and Pauline's wardrobe, although these upgrades felt rather lackluster and underbaked. I only changed my clothes for the minute bonuses they afforded, but I always thought Donkey Kong looked best when rocking his original attire. A transmog system would have been appreciated, but that's probably a bit much to ask for a game of this nature. And finally, there's gold. Lots and lots of shiny gold. Gold is the main currency in Bonanza, used to buy helpful items like balloons that prevent you from dying when you fall, apple juices that replenish your health when you run out, and melon juices that automatically unlock your Bonanzas even if the gauge is empty. These are helpful tools, but the reason gold was included, if you ask me, is because it provides immediate visual feedback to the player in a rewarding way. Smashing most types of terrain for just a few seconds will always yield a reward of gold. Bananas and fossils are encountered every few minutes, acting like highlights of your adventure, but to keep the second-to-second gameplay loop interesting, gold is doled out often. Smash up anything and find shiny gold. I mean, it's gold. Getting more of it has to be a good thing. It looks and sounds rewarding, even if you end up hoarding most of it by the end of your playthrough. So, despite its relative meaningless to the overall adventure, it provides a constant sense of jubilation, rewarding you for doing what this game wants you to do. Destroy things however you want. Of course, going along with that destruction is arguably the other biggest component of the gameplay, bonanzas. Throughout the many layers, DK and Pauline will stumble into 5 elders, each of different animal species. They're geezers who have a knack for music. Pauline aspires to be a singer and does quite a bit of that during the adventure, but interacting with these elders, along with DK, allows her to overcome her stage fright and unleash the power of her voice. This singing unlocks Bonanza skills that transform Donkey Kong into different animals, each with their own unique abilities. And before we get too far away from it, as a DJ's apprentice myself, I really appreciated that these older elders still use vinyl albums instead of the electronic software that I'm familiar with. What can I say? You learn a technique and you stick with it, and I love that these DJs use the vinyl. Anyway, back to Bonanzas, and there's 5 in the game. Monkey, zebra, ostrich, elephant, and snake. The monkey grants the player extra strength, allowing them to smash through tougher terrains. The zebra is a speed boost, allowing you to dash and traverse pathways that crumble easily. The ostrich lets you fly and glide for a short time. The elephant allows you to vac up most types of terrain to clear them out. and the snake grants a mega jump and the ability to slow time. These are pretty standard abilities that you see in a lot of other platformers. Technically, you can't use a Bananza whenever you want, but for all intents and purposes, you totally can, owed to how easy it is to refill your meter and the prevalence of melon juice. What makes the Bananzas so enjoyable to use is that they feel like cheat codes. Nearly everything in the game can be completed using Donkey Kong's base form, but using a Bananza power-up in clever ways feels like you're sequence breaking when it's totally an intended method. For example, there's challenges where DK must destroy 100% of this terrain type before a timer expires, but using the elephant's vacuum to suck it all up does the trick. Or using the ostrich to glide over to a location to grab a banana when I was supposed to go through an obstacle course. And you know what? Many comparisons have been drawn between this title and Mario Odyssey, but honestly, this game reminded me of Zelda's Switch entries just as often. I've already compared it before, but Bananzas really solidified it for me. They feel like the abilities in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, only even more accessible and useful given this game doesn't quite lean into the puzzle elements as much as Zelda. Still, at its core, they remain similar. An objective is presented, in this case a banana, and you're permitted to use your skills to overcome the obstacles in clever ways en route to that collectible. So in many ways, it's sorta like a shrine. Nintendo continues to crush it with this formula, but I do wonder if it will ever start to make all their games feel too similar. Time will tell on that front, but for now, Bananzas are a fantastic addition to Donkey Kong. And they're really the gift that keeps on giving, not only because of their utility, but also because they can be upgraded along with other base skills. For every 5 bananas the player collects, they are rewarded with a skill point, which can be used to grab all sorts of things, like increasing your health and the number of items you can carry, boosting the distance of your radar, allowing you to use terrain to surf across water, and more, alongside of Bananza skills like increasing how much terrain is sucked up in elephant mode, allowing you to glide further as an ostrich, giving you armor while charging your punch as the monkey, or making your glare last longer when in snake form. Some of these abilities cost multiple skill points, but luckily you can reallocate them as you see fit during the post-game. The skills themselves are alright, fleshing out your moveset at times, but mostly just providing incremental buffs to your existing abilities. And rolling right along with the Zelda comparisons, and we have shrine-esque challenges where DK is transported to an interior environment and asked to complete a task or combat encounter. These are nice changes of pace because often smashing your way through is not an option. I mean, it sometimes is, but often you'll be asked to do something else, like defeat a certain number of enemies using environmental hazards, or surfing over thorns, or skating through an obstacle course made of ice, or, well, smashing. I mean, this game is all about it, and yes, smashing is sometimes what you're supposed to do. I mean, blowing up entire buildings before time runs out was one of my favorite repeated shrine types, and that would certainly fall under the destruction category. Still, most of the time, these provide momentary breaks from the annihilation and force you to use your head instead of your hands, and that's a nice touch. The nice part about them too is that each houses 3 bananas, 2 along the main path, but also a hidden one that you'll have to sniff out for yourself. To be fair, it was often pretty easy to find these so-called secrets, but I think that was the point. Nothing in the game is meant to feel too hard, and so these secret bananas being a little easy to find, well, it makes sense. And because there isn't quite as much as destruction, these platformer challenges are the closest things you'll get to downtime in this game. But that can't be said when entering the combat challenges where Void Kong's terrain-covered enemies are patrolling. What I liked about these arenas was that often defeating the enemies was not the only goal. Sure, they were the win conditions, but often the challenge itself was reaching the enemy or discovering how to take them out safely. This includes things like finding enemies hiding within the walls of a maze or destroying terrain that blocks harmful light from entering and dispatching the foes using that. And of course, using your Bananza abilities in both types of these challenge rooms was a great way to flex your creativity and make your experience all the better. What can I say? These bonus rooms are great, and they even feel rewarding to uncover while out exploring. It just gives you another thing to find. One reason Bananza's second-to-second gameplay loop stays strong is the lack of difficulty during the main campaign, as I just alluded to, as you won't really find much resistance from enemies, obstacles, and especially bosses. By allowing that easy loop to endure, it ensures the player continues to stay engaged in the experience. Frustrating deaths or really hard platforming challenges takes the player out of the flow state, and the mechanics and systems are so strong here that jeopardizing the player's fun with too much challenge would have been a mistake. That's not to say the game doesn't get harder. Its optional challenges, as well as how it asks you to navigate terrain during the back half, do stack up, but only in incremental ways. You'll see things like more pitfalls and more hazardous terrain as you push further into the experience. Really, the only instance where more challenge would have been appreciated was in the game's many boss fights, only one of which gave me fits, the final one. Most bosses go down through a flurry of punches, which is pretty on brand for this game, but it leaves them feeling like road bumps rather than formidable foes that the cutscenes and names that come with them suggest. In other words, they're pushovers. That makes it extremely jarring when you get to the final boss and are tested heavily, not only on your understanding of the different Bananza abilities, but also how fast you can switch between them on the fly, while also understanding the different types of terrain. Now, I'm not showing footage of the final boss just yet because it is a major spoiler, so we'll save that for the next section. For now though, it certainly feels like your last big bad is a giant leap in difficulty compared to anything else that the game asks of you in combat. Now, as is on brand with Nintendo, the challenge ramps up when you complete the main story and go for full completion. Not only will there be hundreds of bananas and fossils still out there for you to collect, but also a series of new challenges that unlock. Once you have enough bananas, each of the 5 elders will invite you to partake in a Bananza rehearsal that pushes your limits with their respective transformations. These are by far harder than anything in the main game outside of maybe the final boss, but they aren't unrelenting. I've certainly seen harder endgame content in other titles. The point I wanted to make here though is that Bananza is a game that keeps on giving, as there's plenty more to do after the credits roll. It took me about 20 hours to beat the main story, and I reckon there's just as much content still remaining if I want to go for full completion. So, all in all, this is certainly a full package where you feel like you're getting your money's worth. I've sort of tiptoed around the subject of story for most of this video so far, but that's because it's impossible to talk about it without including spoilers, as those inclusions are what gives the adventure its greatest boost. An influx of nostalgia. So be warned, stop watching the video now if you don't want to see any spoilers. Anyway, the overarching tale isn't anything special and serves mostly as a way to contextualize the level design. Donkey Kong is mining for bananas when suddenly Ingot Isle is attacked by a monkey named Void Kong. The ground is pushed down into the earth, and with no way to climb out, the only direction to go is further down. Along the way, Donkey Kong rescues and frees Pauline, a youngster with a knack for singing, and the two become inseparable as they push onward, defeating Void and his cronies. It's nothing special until the end, where the fan service really kicks in. You see, throughout your adventure, it's possible to notice how much Donkey Kong love has been packed in. From finding Cranky Kong in many levels, to including the DK rap theme, to racing on Rambi, and especially those bonus stages ripped right out of Donkey Kong Country. These were such a cool inclusion and showed me that Nintendo still had a lot of respect and admiration for the monkey. I mean, look at this. How can you not crack a smile if you played any of these games back in the day? Of course, the biggest display of affection for old Donkey Kong would be the true final boss, King K. Rool. Many people speculated that he would show up, and sure enough, he emerges right at the end as Donkey Kong and Pauline make their way through the Forbidden Lair. They're on their way to the planet core to find the Banandium root that grants a wish. They plan to use it to reach the surface again, but the Crooked Crocodile has other plans. Look, I'm not going to pretend I'm some huge fan of Donkey Kong. I did dabble with DK Country back in the day, but just seeing this dude come back put a huge smile on my face. It was a nice plot twist, even if it does make all the scenes with Void Kong feel like a cheap ruse. Regardless, it was worth that sacrifice, as the final hour or so of this game was better off because of it. What can I say, you can't beat the classics, and the King K. Rool reveal was a special moment. What wasn't so special though was the performance of this game, at least at times. I think the art direction is strong, and Nintendo has never been the company to chase the best looking graphics. Rightfully so though, it's worked well for them for decades. What wowed me most with the presentation was how they managed to take biomes we've seen in countless other games, especially other Nintendo titles, and make them feel new again. Forest and ice levels have been beaten to death, but they feel fresh and exciting to explore here. Nintendo continues to persevere on this front. I'm also pretty keen on Donkey Kong's redesign, although I will admit it's a bit jarring in close-up looks because his fur looks more like feathers. Still, it's a very expressive model, which is perfect for a character that doesn't talk. And the other NPCs look good too, especially the Fractones, which are super fun to punch and then watch them rematerialize. Not gonna lie, on the very few occasions that I got frustrated with the game, I took it out on them. Sorry boys. The music is also pretty good, nothing over the top or special, but it caught me off guard a few times. The bubbly and upbeat tunes were expected, but the more quiet and somber melodies that play during some of the smaller layers surprised me in a good way. And don't let my comment on the performance fool you either. The game runs well and maintained a solid frame rate outside of a few boss fights where a lot was going on at once, with new terrain spawning in or tons of enemies on the screen. Outside of that, the frame rate was solid. What surprised me though was the pop-in, especially when you use the ostrich ability to fly and glide over a map. I guess this was a necessity to maintain the frame rate, but it certainly felt behind in 2025. I know the Switch 2 isn't as powerful as other current gen hardware, but I was expecting a little better than this. Still, the art direction more than made up for it, and when the game is this fun, who really cares? As I wrap up this video, let me just say this. When Nintendo puts their nose to the grindstone, they always seem to succeed, finding new ways to reinvent their most iconic games and characters without losing sight of why we love them in the first place. It's not always a smashing success, and it's important to call things out when they screw up, but when a Nintendo game is hitting, it's really hitting. And that's the case with Donkey Kong Bananza, an extremely fun game that puts all the power in your hands. There's light platforming action here that's taken up many notches owed to the destruction physics, allowing you to smash through any problem in creative ways. Bananzas add to the imaginative possibilities and the power rush itself, unlocking awesome power-ups that let you get the job done in many different ways. And at the same time, Nintendo hasn't forgotten what makes DK so iconic, and they pay respect to that deep history throughout this title. The level design is also constantly evolving, introducing new ideas, but never letting them stagnate. And there's just a few things that felt a little off, like heavy amounts of pop-in and the weak bosses, but they're relatively easy to overlook when the second-to-second gameplay is so strong. It's truly one of those games that keeps you hooked, and it keeps you playing, and it keeps your eyes off the clock, as long as you have the stamina to keep smashing away. If you have a Switch 2, there is no reason not to own this game, as I heavily expect it to be a Game of the Year contender as 2025 comes to a close. Nothing else left to say. I highly recommend this game, and I hope you'll give it a shot. Thanks for watching. Alright y'all, that's my full thoughts on Donkey Kong Bananza. It's certainly up there for me for the best game I played this year. It feels like the first true challenger that Expedition 33 has had, but I'm really looking forward to many other of the games still yet to come this year. There's a lot to play in September and October, so I'm not sure what I'll cover next. If I had to venture a guess, it would probably be Silk Song, and then Ghosts of Yotei and Pokemon Legends ZA, so look forward to those. If you enjoyed this video and you want to support the channel further, consider becoming a channel member for only $1 a month, or donating directly through Super Thanks or Buy Me a Coffee, all of which can be found in the comments below. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please leave a like if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing for more, follow me on Twitter at NopNapNarp, donate if you want, and as always, have a nice day and take care.